want to take everybody back to 1980. There were. I'm fond of
great year.
Sort of the 60s and 70s and kind of just watching the cultural rot that began to happen. It's really interesting to look at, but it bore fruit in the Weather Underground before the 80s. But there's a very interesting attack back in 1980 that a whole lot of people don't know about, and I'm ashamed to say I didn't know about it until recently. But it was carried out by a far left, all female terrorist group called M19 or May 19th. They named themselves after Malcolm X's birthday and Ho Chi Minh's birthday, and they got together and they decided that they were going to, as a way of protesting capitalism in the United States and those things, they were going to get some people's attention. So just before, forgive me for reading here, I'm reading from actually a Smithsonian magazine article. Just before 11 p.m. on November 7th, 1983, M19 called the U.S. Capitol switchboard and warned them to evacuate the building. 10 minutes later, a bomb detonated in the building's north wing, harming no one but blasting a 15-foot gash in a wall and causing $1 million in damage. Over the course of a 20-month span, M19 also bombed an FBI office, the Israel Aircraft Industries building, and the South African consulate in New York. DC's Fort McNair and Navy Yard were also hit twice. The attacks tended to follow a similar pattern: a warning call to clear the area, an explosion, a pre-recorded message to the media railing against U.S. imperialism or the war machine under various organizational aliases, never using the name M19. So that was an attack on the Capitol. If we want to talk about attacks on the Capitol, let's talk about that. $1 million in damage, a literal bomb, 15-foot hole blown in a wall. With what happened on January 6th, there were rioters. There was a podium taken. Yeah. There was some mail taken, some laptops taken. In the melee, I think 3 people had heart attacks or strokes. That's what 3 of the deaths came from. 1 person was trampled, and then 1 person was shot by. It was 1 person was trampled, and 1 person was shot by a Capitol police officer. Yeah. Those are horrible. There were deaths involved in that. When you think of the magnitude of an attack, though, the vast majority of those people in the Capitol were standing inside. It's the funniest picture to me. All of these supposed rioters standing in between the stanchions. Yes. The stanchions are the thing at the bank and the movie theater that keep you in line. They're standing in there taking selfies. Those are the vast majority of the rioters who got in there. That's what they're doing.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah. I do want to just contribute.
No, please.
Because I'm not 100% sure, because I have seen almost nothing of it since, which is incredibly surprising given the security apparatus that we have, in this country and in Washington. There were reports of 2 pipe bombs planted. Have we heard that these were fake? Have we heard that? I know they did not go off. Was that just a report, or were these?
No, as far as I know. Now, folks, this is rough when you're watching a news program. We don't know this for sure. That said, there's a whole lot of news to cover. And I don't know the answer to that. And I'm not positive they were ever able to trace who they came from. It's a great question. Yeah. It's a great question. The point here is that you've got an attack like this on the record. And as far as what most of the media is reporting, give the devil its due. There were a couple of remembrances of this right after January 6th. Good for them. But the vast majority of the commentary completely misses this point in the history in the United States as far as political violence goes on the side of the left, not the side of the right. They are the ones who tend to execute. And I was talking with our podcast producer, Kayla Kunkel, earlier today, and Andrew and I were talking about this too. It's a fascinating thing that's happening. You have the left zeroed in on what Trump said. You have the left zeroed in on Marjorie Taylor Greene. You have the left zeroed in on QAnon and the dangers that go with those things. And I look at those things and I think, gosh, that looks about like a little hand grenade on the floor. And you look at what the left has done, and we're going to talk about the Weather Underground bombings quickly here in just a second. You look at what the left has done, and you look at what institutionalized liberal leftism and Marxism did in the 20th century. 100 million people dead. You got a little hand grenade over here, and you've got just a pile of nuclear weapons. Yet conservatives are freaking out. Conservatives will not target the left the way they need to target them and remind the American people this is what we're dealing with.
They
we're
fall
dealing
for
with
close-up
terrorist
magic
bombers.
every time.
They do. It's a sleight of hand. And so just a refresher, a lot of you folks know about the Weather Underground, but just in case you don't, the Weather Underground, on January 29th, 1975, an explosion rocked the the headquarters of the U.S. State Department in Washington, D.C. No one was hurt, but the damage was extensive, impacting 20 offices on 3 separate floors. Hours later, another bomb was found at a military induction center in Oakland, California. It was safely detonated. The Weather Underground stepped forward. They were inspired by communist ideologies and embraced violence and crime as a way to prevent the Vietnam War, racism, to protest, the Vietnam War, racism, and advance other left-wing aims. Our intention is to disrupt the empire, to incapacitate it, to put pressure on the cracks, claimed the group's 1974 manifesto. By the next year, the group had claimed credit for 25 bombings, including, again, the U.S. Capitol. Police found 57 sticks of dynamite, 4 completed bombs, detonators, timing devices, and other bomb-making equipment in a Weather Underground townhouse. So again, the violence, the vitriol, the viciousness, the disregard for life, that comes from the left, folks, and it is a crime that the media in the United States does not contextualize all of this.